What's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Gordon Lyde. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm excited to jump into this. When we started the podcast, we've gone all over in the guests we have gotten on, but the pure fallen up guest is someone who went through the struggles and was able to truly stay stuck, not know there's a way out, and then find that way out. But not only find that way out, then share the message and give back to others. And just reading your bio and your history, that rings so true to you. And I sit here and I'm like, wow, I'm so excited to get to know your life experience and what you've been through, because I feel like our stories, without even knowing, are so similar in just the directions we went. And then hearing that you started and you did the DARC program and are licensed alcohol and drug counselor, was just such a similar story and trajectory to the way that I went. So I just want to know, how did it start? Let's dive into this thing.
Okay, so thank you, and that's a great question. I think the reason why I got into it all, I needed to make sense of people. Like, one of the things I've always said that one of my unique gifts is to be able to connect the dots, right? Like, make sense of why people do stuff. I needed to, because I have I like to call it an interesting childhood. And some things happened to me during it, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I needed to make sense of it. And when I did the DART program because I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I delved into psychology, and I realized what psychology was. It wasn't so much the study of humans, it's the study of human behavior. And human behavior is what I needed to make sense of, because people did some screwed up things to me growing up. And I needed to understand some of the whys. Maybe not their why, but some of the whys as it is universal. Okay. So I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. I was a ward of the state. So I went from DCYS to DOC, literally. So my mother, due to her own choices in life, she was ill-equipped or unwilling to actually raise children. And there was 4 of us. We call ourselves step kids because our ages are like steps. My oldest brother turns 56 Sunday. I turned 55 yesterday. My sister turned 50. She turns 54 next month. And my baby brother, she took a hiatus. She took a year off and skipped him, and he turns 52 in August. So we're like stepkids. We're like one after the other. So she just had a baby, got back on those streets. And let's be honest, since we're being honest, my mother was a prostitute. That was her trade. And she had us all young. So she left me on a couch and went back to doing what she does. That was my first big thing. So abandonment came in early. I became a part of the foster home system of the 70s. There was no child protection laws. So a lot of cruel things happened to us growing up. I learned the world wasn't a safe space. I learned all the forms of abuse, physical, verbal, sexual. I was physically raped by a male babysitter the summer before my 10th birthday. So I had all these traumatic things. I know what it's like to be locked in cabinets, cigarette butts put out on you. I know all these horrific things. So when you have that type of experiences at such a young age, you need to make sense of the world in order to function in it, or it's going to break you. And I've always been a stubborn individual. You're not going to break me. So I needed to figure some things out. So as life went on, I got into reading and studying and learning some things.
During that initial phase where you had all of these remarkably trying events take place, what was the mentality going through that, right? What was the why or the making sense of it for you in those moments?
The weird thing, and I guess it's not weird when you think about it, I was still trying to please the people that hurt me. I was still trying to be liked, and I still suffer from that to this day. Being liked, not wanting you to be upset with me, and letting it rent space in my head if I thought you were. So even during all that, I was still trying to please the people that were hurting me the most. And I internalized it, which is natural when you think about it. A child, if you look at it, even Erickson's development of a child, it's like at those stages, everything is cause and effect. A child, even as an infant, it cries, it quickly learns, if I cry, this person, this entity will give me something. So them getting something, they were the cause, that was the effect. And growing up, when you start dealing with abuse, you think you did something wrong. I made mommy mad, that's why she beat me. It has nothing, because you can't grasp the fact that dad did this or this happened and they're just frustrated and they're taking it out on you. You can't grasp that. But what you can grasp is the simplicity of this happened and this was the result. However unrealistic it is, but in your mind, that's what it is. So I try to please those people.
Yeah, it was a legitimate core belief,
Yes.
right? And I think that is it is a fascinating thing about human behavior, right? Where if all I know is this one thing, I create my own narrative around it, however distorted it may be to the outside looking in. That is my truth, right? And to be able to break that, I think takes not only a great deal of luck in meeting the right people, but it also takes this desire to really begin to dig deep and peel those layers back. Yeah, I just think it's so incredibly fascinating. So go on. I'm sorry for interjecting there.
That's okay. That's okay. So as a result of those things, I learned to look for numb, right? Anything to make me not feel. And I did that before I picked up substances. I didn't want to feel, so I needed a distraction. And I always say, God bless me with the ability to draw. So like, I'm a fantastic artist. Like I can draw you guys sitting there. I picked up a pencil when I was 9 years old and been able to draw anything. So that was my escape. I learned how to escape through artwork, but that can only get you so far. Growing up in the projects with different things happening and just a normal progression of that childhood curiosity going into my teenage years. You had to have your first, kiss your first girl, smoke your first joint, have your first drink.
Right.
And of course, I excelled at that. So I had my first drink, fell in love with it, was able to consume tons of alcohol. That made me numb. Plus, it made me popular because as a result, people always said, do you remember what you did last night? No, I didn't, because I was a blackout drunk at the age 14 drinking Wild Turkey. But they seemed to rally, oh, you was crazy. And any acceptance, however negative it may be, is still acceptance. So I lived for that. And I did the typical things teenagers do. But that progression just went on to drugs and crack cocaine and things like that. But what I didn't realize what was also happening was the kissing of the girl. I didn't make that connection till later because I wanted to be appreciated so much. I fell in love 100 times a day. If you smiled at me and called me cute, we went together. Whether you knew it or not. I don't know where you going. You live here now. So I started taking hostages at 15. Even though they didn't know they was hostages, they were hostages.
Right.
So how I went into relationships moving forward was how I seen myself was directly connected to how you seen me. So if you thought I was cute, I was cute. The minute you thought I was a a-hole, I became an a-hole. That's how I seen myself because I had no self-evaluation. I was never taught that. Everything was still cause and effect. I was still that child stuck in cause and effect. So if this happened, these are your feelings. I caused them. And I went through life like that and through the drugs and committing the crimes and things like that. Next thing I know, I started getting arrested, getting a PTA, promise to appear, taking a PTR, promise to run, never showing up to court, and just trying to avoid everything. But you can't avoid things like that. Next thing I started doing time. And I became comfortable with it.
How old were you when your first bid?
My first arrest, I was 12. My first time getting incarcerated, 19. 30 days Northeast correction, stuff like that, where you was able to wear your regular clothes. But by the time I got into my 20s, it was 6 months and stuff. And then at 26, I was given 10 years. And I did 9 years, 8 months, and 3 weeks off of 10.
So tell me what it's like when you say, really quickly, I became comfortable with it. Just what that process is like, because I think that is a remarkably powerful thing to say.
Okay. I became comfortable because I found a place. There was nothing to figure out. The simplicity of prison was great for me. You wake me up. You tell me where to go. I go do this. If I don't, I get in trouble. If I do it, I get rewarded. I didn't have to figure out anything. Commissary, I just learned the basics, how to fill out a commissary sheet. There was the simplicity of prison is like, it was relaxing to me. And I was given my own space. I never had my own space. Everything I did, I shared. So I had my own space. Even if it was just a bunk, that was mine. I was responsible to maintain it. Mm-hmm. So there was no responsibility. There was no expectations. And also in prison, you can be whoever you want to be. You want to talk about fantasy? The pastime was with me and my cellmates or bunkies. I lie to you for 10 minutes. You lie to me for 10 minutes. Then we take a 5-minute break and start over.
Beat downs.
Yeah, it was like I could be whoever I want. There was no one to challenge that.
Was there one specific, for lack of better terms, kind of character persona that you took on often that you really felt like was almost in line with who you wanted to be? Or did that shift as time went on?
Yes, I wasn't a bully, but I was a tough guy. And I walked around what I call the gorilla suit. I have scowl on my face. I go work out. I didn't say much to anybody. And I just kind of walked around looking angry all the time. Because the truth to it was, I was afraid that you were going to find out just how afraid I was in there. I didn't want to fight. If I did, it was because I had no other choice, but I didn't want to fight. I wanted people to genuinely like me, but I couldn't tell you I wanted you to like me. So I had to put on these layers of this persona, which is very exhausting when you think about it. Every day you got to pretend to be something that's the complete opposite of what's going on truly inside. And I did that, but I developed an identity for myself because people did like me because I could draw. And that is a skill that is valued in there because I could I could put a picture on an envelope, a T-shirt, send it to your kids, and I helped you to build your relationships or keep the connection going. I was able to help you do that, so I was valued. I had never been valued before. So prison became comfortable. I had an identity there.
So valued, accepted.
And predictable.
And predictable. Right.
All the things my life up until that point was totally lacking. I found them in prison. I found acceptance in prison.
Tell me about that, because that's a big word right there.
I found people in prison, when you can be whoever you want to be, they'll accept you for it. There's no one trying to investigate, punch holes in your story.
Right.
They take you on face value. If you say you was moving weight upstate, okay. Even if you ask to bum a soup right after you say that, they don't care. They can know you're lying, but they don't care. They accept you for what you present because everyone's trying to be something in there. So I found acceptance in that total dysfunction. There was some sense of belonging there. So I was okay with it.
Was that, did you have that sense of belonging the whole term of that 10 years?
Yes.
Was there ever a switch in the character that you were as the bully? Was that ever, like, when did that switch happen? Because I met you were a big teddy bear.
So
you know
that happened after prison. So because I needed that gorilla suit, because when you're hurt so much, when you carry so much pain and vulnerability underneath the surface that every second is trying to ooze out, I didn't know anything but anger and pain. Although I felt everything. Like if you said something derogatory to me, that may belittle me. That in actuality may hurt my feelings. I may feel less than. But I don't know how to articulate. At the time, I didn't know how to articulate those things. I didn't know how to express that hurt me. But I did know how to express you pissed me the hell off. Anger is that secondary emotion that's most common, especially for me, because it was something that was familiar to me and it was recognizable by others.
Also, you want to know that I think it's not even funny, but the truth about anger is there's a high associated with anger.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And anger, as you said, being this secondary emotion, it's always the product of these underlying emotions. So I go do something, I get really embarrassed. Well, what feels better, being angry, feeling embarrassed? I do something and I feel sad. I do something and I feel less than. What feels better? Those emotions or anger? There's always that high with anger. So
Absolutely.
it makes so much sense to just go right to that.
I will run with that anger till it totally runs out. Then I'm exhausted. There's a total depletion of energy and everything.
And even that for some people can be really euphoric, right? When it's like, hey, I got nothing left to give. Nothing matters anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I emptied the tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like for me. And many things happened to me in prison. Like I was shanked and left for dead in E3 showers in Cheshire because I allegedly did something to someone's cousin and left them in a wheelchair. The cousin was shot. Here's the truth of the matter. I don't know if I did it or not. I stayed high so much. There's like at least almost a decade of my life back then that's a complete blur. I remember certain things happening, but I couldn't tell you when it happened. I can tell you it was cold out, so it must have been winter. Things like that. It was because there were times I was smoking crack so much I would be up for a week straight. So I kind of lived in that sensory deprivation type thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is by definition psychosis at that point, right?
Yes, it was cocaine psychosis. So I didn't know. I lived and existed in this surreal moment of time and space back then. So when they said this happened, couldn't say definitively if it happened or not. But all I knew was because someone did that to me, I was angry. All I remember was they spoke Spanish. So for a good 18 months, if you spoke Spanish, I was like the boxer would go ding, ding. I just started swinging.
Really?
Because I had this philosophy. If I jump on every one, I might get the right person. Made no sense, but it worked for me because it fueled my anger and it gave me a purpose. So the more things that distracted me, the less time I had to think about the daughter that I left at home that was growing up without a father.
Right.
That I had no words to explain why I didn't walk away from the situation. Because when you're in prison, you can talk that principle. You can explain principle with another group of idiots that's sitting in the same situation. But try to explain principle to a little girl that just wanted her dad home. To a little girl that needed her dad when she had nightmares because she was being bullied in school because she was a little overweight. That needed her dad to explain some things, to take her to school, to protect her.
Right.
Try to explain principle to that person. And I had no words for it. So to avoid thinking about it and feeling those feelings with those situation, I found distractions even in prison.
What was the moment And was it during this 10-year sentence, or was it after where you said, hey, I want to do something different with life?
So it was after. Like during prison, toward the end, there was a counselor, Carl Robinson. He was a supervisor, Mike Fiore. He told me about how he used to be in prison in the galleys, and now he's acting deputy warden at Carl Robinson and stuff. And I thought that was amazing, right? So I went to the NA meetings, and I did the tier programs, and I did all the, because I can excel with stuff like that. I could be a good soldier and follow rules. If you tell me it's going to get me out earlier, then cool. So I went to those meetings, and I got involved, and I learned some things. But I wasn't thinking that I wasn't going to do this again. I figured I'm just going to make good of the time, and I'll hope I don't get caught the next time. So when I came home of October 2004, I was high before the sun went down. After all that time, I was high. After being clean almost a decade, I was high before the sun went down.
What went into that decision?
Right.
If there even was a decision, right?
It wasn't a decision. It was planning. I was like, okay, when I get out, I'm getting high.
So this was the thought throughout that.
Muscle memory. It was like, I'm out, I get high.
It is after the 10 years.
Yeah. After 9 years, 8 months, and 3 weeks, I was high before the sun went down.
Did you have the same urge during the bid?
No.
Okay.
In the beginning, I did, but during the middle, I didn't. But when it was coming up to the day I was leaving, I'm like, okay, where am I going to cash this check they're going to give me?
Right.
And once it just took me the time to cash the check, to find who had what, and the cop. That was it. I had such a little parole time. My parole officer didn't really care, and I wound up going to Springfield for whatever reason, got in trouble there, came back. So this went on for 4 years. I still used and took hostages and all that. I just got little odd jobs. I stopped doing stuff in the street. So I still ran and created havoc for my life. But December 22nd of 2008, I was at the Regal Inn Motel in New Haven on Whaley Avenue. I was coming off a long run that I robbed my then girlfriend's brother for drug money. I think it was like $37,000. And I just went on the party of my life from motel to motel, running around getting high. And it was December 22nd. I was in room 217, long stay on the backside of Regal Inn. It was a little after 12. And I truly believe the God of my understanding allowed me to feel all the misery and feelings that I've been trying to numb my entire life, all in one moment. I kid you not, I felt misery like on a cellular level. Like every fiber of my being was screaming. And all I knew was two things. I didn't want to die, and I couldn't go back to prison. That was it. And because of those things, I knew if I stayed in that room, one or both those things was going to happen. So I remember taking the money I had left, which was about $3,000, some clothes that I had, and left. And mind you, this was the party of my life. This was the party that I always swore I was missing, which kept me outside at night. That fear that the minute I go in, they're going to be like, yo, as soon as you left,
Yep.
Ben showed up and it was crazy. I was the host of my party like that. But I left that room and I checked into another room, and I called Carnes Weech Treatment Facility in Torrington. Because that was familiar, because I was just there a few months before to appease this same girlfriend so she didn't put me out, so I went into treatment. Because that was another thing with me. If it wasn't prison, I was in treatment.
Oh.
Because it was the same thing. You put me in a controlled environment, I thrive. So I went to Carnes Weech. I showed up to there Christmas Eve of 2008. I walked into treatment for the last time. And the guy who is now my sponsor was my counselor. He said, "Hey, Gordon, you're back. What's different?" I said, "Tom, whatever you ask me to do, I'll do." That's all I knew. And I've been in Torrington ever since. December 22nd will make 16 years that I've been clean. And that's when I decided I needed to do some other things. That's when I decided I'm going to make a decision to use my pain and uncertainty and all these things I need to understand those things a little bit better. And that's what motivated me, because I got my GED in prison and I said, okay, let's go to school. And so that started that whole motivation of learning about stuff.
What was the healing process like for you, right? Because it sounds like on that night in that hotel room, you moved into this phase where you're like, I know I don't want this thing for my life. I'm not sure what I want for my life, but I know exactly what I don't want. And that was almost the start of this commitment to yourself to say, I'm not going to go back to doing this, right? Can you talk a little bit about what that healing process was, what the how you were able to repair, if you have, the damages that were done through your active years?
Yeah. So for the first year, I didn't know how to do anything but not use. I didn't come back to visit New Haven I had almost 2 years before I could even come back to New Haven. Right. All I had the ability to do was not pick up. I couldn't make sense of anything else. Right. So the healing process didn't really start. I didn't start working towards anything deliberately till like year 2, going on 3. And at that point, because at first, let's be honest, the minute you get 30 days clean, everybody and their mama want to run back and say, hey, look at me. I'm clean. Forgive me. I had some good people around me that told me, don't do that. Don't do that.
The 9 miles in, 9 miles out. That was one of my favorite sayings I've ever heard in my life.
Because actually my mother that abandoned me, that we still have this weird relationship to this day. But I remember when I got my first year clean and I called her. Hey, Ma, today's my anniversary. She said, what anniversary? I ain't been clean. I ain't done drugs in a year. She said, oh, that's nice. I haven't done drugs in 62 years. Meaning she never did crack cocaine. So my little celebration was shattered with that.
Right.
And at first I want to be like, F you. But then I kind of realized what she meant. It's like I'm patting myself on the back for something that's equivalent to say, I'm a good father. Newsflash, you're supposed to be. Right. You're supposed to be. That's the job description. Be good at it. No one says, yeah, have a kid, be a deadbeat dad. No, you're supposed to be good at it. So, but that's when I started doing some things. And then to be truly honest, I needed a little more pain as motivation. So I was finishing up what they call their halfway house, McCall House. I had maybe 7-8 months. She showed up there. She had a beautiful smile, and she thought I was cute, and she messed around and called me cute twice, and then gave me a kiss on the cheek. We went together. And next thing I know, I'm in a relationship. And we start living together, and she wasn't ready to stay clean for whatever reason. No shade on her. But she relapsed a ton of times. And again, I was still trying to validate myself through how other people see me. So I needed her to like me, respect me, look up to me. So I wouldn't give up on her. I figured I can keep her clean. All she needed is someone to support her. And all I wind up doing was enabling her, allowing her to stay just as sick. And that went on for 2.5 years.
How was your journey with sobriety during that?
By the grace of God, I never picked up. But I isolated myself even from my sponsor because she started calling AA a cult. She didn't like it because she wasn't living right. So I had to choose. I felt like I had to choose between her and the fellowships. She slept with me every night, so I chose her. She called me cute. They didn't call me cute when I walked in. They just called me Gordon. Right. It was done. So I did that until I couldn't do that no more. And I had a beautiful place. I started working in this field at this time. I was already in school, working towards completing DART degree and stuff like that with my associates. I was working towards that, but I was still dealing with an active addict and alcoholic. So by the grace of God, I say I stayed the course. But the minute I left her, snuck out while she was at work, I grabbed the TV, my clothes, and checked into a sober house. And at that point, I had 4 years clean. And that's when my recovery journey officially started, because I had no more excuses. Here I am. I haven't used in 4 years. I'm working in this field. I'm trying to help people. I'm in school. And I'm just as broken as ever. And that's when I made a deliberate effort to get better, to help start healing Gordon. And that's when it started.
Tell me about that effort.
That was painful. That was so painful because I had to look at, and I guess I did it a little differently. I didn't go all the way back first. I started with the most recent pain and started connecting the dots where that came from. And I realized the pain was the same my entire life. The only thing different was the faces of those who caused it, or I allowed myself to be in those situations with. All my relationships that I'd ever been in, they were the same person. They were the same person. They just looked different. Mm-hmm. I was attracted to their brokenness because that's all I knew was broken. If I recognize low self-esteem, oh my God, God created you for me because you're just like me. So that's all I was able to see. Mm-hmm. So I found dysfunction. I was totally attracted to dysfunction and brokenness. Degradation was a endearing quality in someone that I fell in love with because that's all I knew. That's all I ever knew. I wasn't taught to have self-esteem, to look at myself in high esteem. I wasn't taught to value myself. I was told stuff like this because I'm biracial. My father was white. He was one of my mother's tricks. And growing up with my grandparents, well, my grandmother more so, she was from the deep South and she had a total disdain for whites simply because they represented the most cruel group of people she ever met. So she couldn't love me. So I heard many times in her house, you think you better than because you got that shit color. So you don't value yourself when you told you look like shit your entire life. And someone that's supposed to love you can't get past the way you look to actually love you as her grandson. But she can love your brother who looks your complete opposite. Like my brother Will, I always mess with him, say he's so black he sweat coffee. That's how dark he is. If he stand by that door, close his eyes, that door became a fucking hallway. But when you grow up with stuff like that, learning to value yourself is something you know nothing of. So my relationships reflected that. So when I got around to learning about myself and delving into it, it was painful because I had to really look at reality. There was no dressing it up, making it fit. I had to see things for what they was, and that was very painful. My actions, leaving my daughter, not being a part of her life. Some of the women I used and abused and took as hostages. And I thought I was being what I was supposed to be, but I was weaponizing their pain against them, pretty much. And when you look at the sum total of the bad choices you make, it's kind of hard not to cry. And so I spent a lot of years crying and hurting and trying to figure some things out, making decisions not to do it again.
I look at the outcome is not doing these things again, right? Mm-hmm. What were the processes that you were able to do that led to you not doing those things again? What were the foundational or fundamental changes that you were able to to make?
The biggest change I made, and the most fundamental one, is getting good counsel. So I surrounded myself with men that didn't care about my feelings, would clearly tell me, your feelings is not my responsibility. They're yours to deal with, that were not afraid to call me on stuff. So I surrounded myself, I built a solid network of men like that and trusted that they had my best interest at heart. So I did that. That was the biggest corner piece of my foundation, that cornerstone, was the men I surrounded myself with, that I could be honest and vulnerable with. And then it was a lot of trial and error, because I would love to say everything fell into place, but no, I still make mistakes to this day. I'm still damaged to this day. But and then I realized I was given some good information. They said, Gordon, if you're ever feeling bad about yourself, help another human being. They can't exist in the same space, right? So I took that. And the person that told me, his name was Big Dave Nolan. He was my original sponsor. And I took that, and he had frog, this tattoo on his knuckles, fully relying on God. Because he always said, if I have God in one hand and I help another drunk with the other, I don't have a third hand to drink. So when he passed away, I put it on both my hands, because I figured if I hold on to my belief or concept of God, and I'm being of service to another human being in some capacity, I don't have a third hand to screw my life up. So I delved in. That's when I really delved into the service of helping people. And it came from an authentic, and continues to come from an authentic space. All I want to do is, I don't care what you did. I don't care where you come from. I don't care about anything. How can I help you? And sometimes it's as simple as paying for a cup of coffee.
Right.
How can I help you? And that's the space that I got into. And once I got into that space, my world opened up. I found out I was always good at counseling and learning and being able to identify with things. But once I got into that almost spiritual space of wanting to be of service, my ability to be good in those spaces just took off. So all of a sudden, I'm a case manager doing this, I'm a counselor doing this, and then I become a program manager. That's when I met Kevin, and they entrusted me to build a program for reentry. That's when I got into that reentry space, because, okay, I can identify where they're coming from. I was in those projects. I was in that prison cell. I know what it's like to exist in this confined space where you got to eat, sleep, and defecate all in the same space. And sometimes you got to share that space and try to sleep while this person is defecating right behind this sheet right here. Mm-hmm. And most people, if you don't know what that's like, you can't identify the degradation that you call normal. Most people will not eat in their bathroom, right, sitting on the edge of their tub or in a chair looking at your toilet, having a carton of milk in your toilet and flushing it to keep it cold.
Or washing your sheets in the toilet.
Yes. Yeah. In that environment, to be when you think about it, so normal. There's nothing wrong with that. So to get into the reentry, into that space, and knowing exactly when someone comes home, I can look at them and know exactly what they're about to experience. Feeling awkward because all of a sudden you find yourself standing in your shower at home with slides on because you're used to getting in there with shower shoes, and you do it without thinking. That muscle memory kicks in, and it's just of a different world. That not fitting in, doubting yourself, can you do this? So when I got into that, I knew I can connect with them because I know what they're going through. And I just did it. And the world has opened up to me tenfold. I wind up getting a pardon. So 25 felony convictions. And I got to say, I was insulted by that. It wasn't that they gave it to me, that they did it in 3 seconds. I have the recording. I'll show it to you. I recorded it because I logged on. They did it online. I didn't have to be present. And it said, as soon as I logged in, it said, GW Lyde, motion for full absolute pardon. How do you pick? Okay, GW Lyde granted. 30 years of 25 felony conviction and you wiped it away. I felt insulted. I felt like I needed more time. You needed to take more time with me. Don't you know who I am? So I was insulted for a while, but then because of that, it opened up. I went into DOC. I went to do the academy with the COs, and I started to work in the prisons at Manson Youth. So here I am, a convicted felon, and we're touring some of the facilities. I went to Walker and stared at an APOD number 2 cell where I spent 6 months in that cell to be able to look into the cell that I spent when I was starting my 10-year sentence. Look into that very cell. So there was some surreal moments that I was allowed to experience. Then I left DOC and now I'm with Demas. And I'm working with Demas with the mental health and substance abuse in Middletown. And I've run into guys that I was locked up with. Running around Middletown doing the same stuff. Right. So life in its own way have come full circle, but better. It's kind of weird. Sometimes I don't believe my life. I always say I live in this perpetual pinch myself moment because I get to do some things that are so far-fetched from where I thought I would be. So
yeah, it's I definitely relate to that part of wanting to be accepted. Mm-hmm. But how ironic is it that when you start being of service and doing the things that are you, that you've been accepted more than ever?
Yeah. That is crazy because if I was to tell people who's in my phone now, like I have sitting judges in my phone.
Right.
I have politicians, a senator, former governors, stuff like that. People like yourselves, like nonprofit executives that, right. And I'm like, before my phone was names like Paco, Kool-Aid, Cool Pop. There was all these code names. And,
right. Yin Yang.
Yeah. So, and I still wanted to be accepted by them. So I was all these things. And the minute, like you said, the minute I get comfortable or start to become comfortable in my own skin, a world that I thought was so out of reach that I didn't even realize existed most days have embraced me.
I think that's the beauty of you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And just how you were able to truly put in the work and overcome this core belief that kept you down for so long, right? Mm-hmm. And I look back at, things in my life where if I don't have a reference point to compare it to, I just have an idea. And if I believe that idea and I continue doing what I'm currently doing, I'm selling myself so incredibly short. Mm-hmm. And when I actually am able to challenge that idea, 9 times out of 10, that's only because I have good people in my life that are like, dude, what are you talking about? You haven't even done this thing yet. How about you give that a go for a little bit? And then you can weigh your 2 choices. But when I only know the one choice that I've always known and I live that, I sell myself wildly, wildly short. And it takes a lot of courage, which I think is such a huge part in sitting across from you tonight. I'm like, you're courageous. Right. The things that you have faced and continue to push through, and then not. How easy would it be for you to maybe that's the key to all this is you can't selfishly keep it for yourself and have it. You have to give it away, but it might be tempting to be like, I'm gonna rest on my laurels and soak in this life, and maybe I won't give back today. Maybe I won't show up on a Monday night at 7:00 and hop on a podcast and share my story. Like we're privileged to. Yeah,
I can't see myself not doing it because my being of service and being attempted to be selfless has created so many opportunities. Like one of your former guests is like one of my dear friends. Like how many dudes from my neighborhood, from my background, my criminal records say one of their dearest friends is a FBI agent.
Right.
Me and Charles Grady, that's my dog. Even when we're mad at each other, that's family.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. Like, I became his senior program manager. Like, I exist in these spaces where I connect with people that I would have never, if you told me when I was in that motel room, when I called that drug treatment facility and said I needed to come back, if you whispered even slightly that I would be an executive director of Evolution Reentry, if I was a senior program manager of Hangtime, working for Demas, having all these connections to people that know me, that respect me for just what I do and who I am, despite, or not even despite, because of who I used to be and what I've done with who I used to be, the things that how I've utilized that to help me and help others. If you told me that, I would have sworn you were higher than me then.
When you can turn poison into medicine, and then you can go and you can sell that medicine, you're in a good spot. And that's I think it's just so inspiring, and it's why I love this podcast. And
this is awesome. When I seen that, even though I've already told you guys that someone told me to check out so when I actually, story behind it, I started with Jackie Purcell with Evolution. I decided I took her offer to be one of her executive directors of Men of Evolution. She said, check out the pod. We got different podcasts. We have Criminal Justice Cafe. And I looked through the lists and I seen this one, Falling Up. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. Then I looked at it and it was you guys, especially Kevin. I'm like, you mean to tell me my guy has a podcast he hasn't even asked me about?
Oh, listen, we're going to break this up tonight.
But it was funny because I do believe that he mentioned it to me, but just our busyness of our lives. And then I was like, oh, this must be new. And then I seen all the episodes. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Everybody's up there. I knew over half your guests.
Literally.
But the cool thing about it was I seen the content and I seen the message behind it. And then I fully understood falling up.
Right.
We all fall, but we should be falling upward in a different direction, not back to repeat the same thing. So it reminds me of the Will Smith little snippet of his thing, failing. Mm-hmm. You must always, because the lessons are in the failing. Mm-hmm. That's where the gems. We don't learn from successes. We celebrate successes. So you should fail early, so you're always learning sooner. Mm-hmm. You should fail often, so you're constantly in a state of learning. And most importantly, you should always fail forward. Doing something, pushing the envelope, trying something new, instead of failing backwards, repeating the same thing, which is insanity. So
correct.
When I seen the podcast and I seen the name, after I got past my little petty feelings, I was like, this is awesome. This is so awesome.
I do want to take a step back because you mentioned mentorship. Mm-hmm. And that process, right, of finding mentors, receiving mentorship, and then in your role now being a mentor in the many roles, right? That mentor-mentee relationship, like what did it look like for you when you first started receiving that mentorship from those gentlemen?
It was different because I was still trying to figure out what it looked like, what it was supposed to be. Because, mind you, before then, every male that was close to me hurt me. Mm-hmm. Some of my most horrific things in my childhood was at the hands of men. So it wasn't a built-in trust. So it was always watching and like being very watchful, like, what's going on with this? Why Why are you touching me? Why are you hugging me? Why? So I wasn't really open to it, but I don't know, something within me, it was like an instinct that said, listen, let's just try this. Nothing else has worked for you. So I started listening and I started paying attention. And I started trusting, and then I didn't listen to everything. And then it was like, kind of told you that was going to happen if you ain't listen. So I took my bruises and I delved into it, and it was like, okay, I remember that saying, no man is an island. I can't do this alone, so I need people around me. And I love old, like, Greek mythology and movies, and all kings had good counsel. They sought good counsel. You need that. Mm-hmm. That's where the strength is the good counsel. It's not you. You're a figurehead, but if you want to succeed and be prosperous in life, you need to have good counsel and rely on it. Because if I rely on myself, I can talk. See, because I know me. I can talk myself into the most insane things and make it make sense just for a second so I can do it. I've done it before. So once I started receiving that, it was only a natural progression that I'd be willing to do that for others, that I make myself available with no judgment. And I try to live by that no matter where you come from, what's going on. Hey, how can I help? And you make mistakes, I don't care. I always got one question. Did you learn from it? If you learn from it, don't regret it. It was needed. So it wasn't a mistake, because a mistake, just the terminology mistake, that's just a construct we put together to justify doing something that didn't work out right. Because when did it become a mistake? When it didn't render the results you didn't see coming? Let's look at relationships. We all can sit there and say, oh, that relationship, that was a mistake. Really? Because I remember when you wanted her to meet your mama, right, your grandmama, and it was the proper, I think we all make the best decisions we can make given all the parameters and that moment. We don't make bad mistakes. We make the best choices we can make giving all the pieces of that puzzle. Now, when we step back after we grow a little bit, we look back, we realize that wasn't the best mistake in this moment because we have a little more information. But given what we had when we made those mistakes, it's just like when we're 13. We can all look at some of the decisions we made at 13 and be like, yeah, that wasn't a good one. But given all the resource and information we had at 13, that was the best decision we can make. So the title mistake is just a construct we use to make ourselves feel better about a choice we made that didn't render all the results we thought we were deserving of. That's all that is.
Makes perfect sense to me. Makes perfect sense. The idea of service. Where are you now that you're embarking on new journeys with Evolution Reentry? Shout outs to Jackie. Man, you wasn't there for that podcast, but that was a good podcast. What does it look like now? What's the next steps in terms of you being of service?
So being of service, like with Jackie. So I'm thanks to Jackie Purcell. I'm the new executive director, as I said, of Men of Evolution. Evolution itself, primarily for the past decade, only worked with women in the federal space. Their mentorship program, pre, during, and post incarceration, they give that support, different things that they offer. So we're starting the men's, and so what I want to do, I want to mirror what the women did. Makes sense. That worked. If it's been going for 10 years, there's some positive outcomes. But I want to take that, build it in Connecticut, in the space that I'm known for, and I want to take it on the road, take the show on the road. Eventually, my goal is the name Gordon Lyde to be synonymous with service and help in North Dakota, South Dakota, Arizona. Like in Connecticut, in these spaces, if any reentry room you go into, you mention Gordon Lyde, it's not bragging, people will know know me or have heard of me in these spaces of what I've contributed to and the things that I've tried to be a part of. I want to be of service outside. Connecticut is very small. You don't even see it on the map. You just see CT on that map. That's how small. Yeah, because like you could fit Connecticut in one of the New York boroughs.
Yeah.
The town I live in, Torrington, has 37,000 people.
Damn.
Yeah. So, but I want to take this show on the road. I want my level of service to be known nationwide. That's where I want to take what we do here, because we do some phenomenal things here in the state of Connecticut. And I want the rest of the country to know what we do. We may be small, but we pack a big punch.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where my vision of where service goes within the next 10 years. I want to take it out that way.
Yeah, it's going to get done. It's going to and needed. And Connecticut, yeah, is one of the front runners when it comes to reentry services. So, and you're one of the front runners within the front runner.
And we need to take it because we think we do it in Connecticut. And when we think of these bigger states, our budget is very small. They have cities that have a larger budget than we have in a state. So imagine if we take our principles, our values, our concepts, and what we do and connect that with resources in states like California or Texas, or even in the Midwest, the North and South Dakotas. Imagine if we can take that and combine those two. Imagine how the level of help we can do, what we can provide. I mean, we're not trying to remove all prisons. Prisons have a purpose. They do. I'm not one of those that get on my soapbox and say, we should need to shut down all prisons. Okay. If you don't have a place to put, where are you going to put the people that are committing crimes? I believe in consequences, because if you remove consequence, there's no learning. Now, the conditions in which we find these consequences can be changed and altered. They don't have to be cruel. So I want to take things like that, and we'll have with more resources, we can do more work. Let's be honest.
So are you going to focus on the federal level, or are you going to focus on both?
I'm going to focus on both, because right now I'm trying to get a glimpse into it. One of the guys I've been talking to is out of New York. He's about to surrender next month to Lexingburg to start his prison sentence. Mm-hmm. I've already started communicating with him. We're going to do lunch this week. And when he surrenders, my goal is to be there with him up until that day he goes in, and connect with him throughout the whole time he's there. So when he's done, we've built this relationship, and he's coming home to someone he knows that will be there to give him the emotional, mental support that's needed. And that will be my introduction to within this federal space. And I want to blow that up and become known. So while he's in there, he can tell other people, hey, we do this organization, this guy, he does this and does this, mm-hmm. and connect them. So everyone deserves support while they're in there, and they deserve some opportunities when they get home, because they're already going to get the scarlet letter. You're going to get the blemish. You're a federal felony. You have that conviction. You're going to get that on a state or federal level. That is going to happen no matter what. But you can also get support from agencies and individuals that look past that and see the person, because it's the person that existed before the crime. It's the person that exists during the crime, during the cleanup. During the cleanup, when you're in that space, 90% of the people are only going to look at your crime. You're being treated for your crime, your behavior. Mm-hmm. I think everyone's deserving to be seen as a person during that process, and especially after you've done your cleanup. You acknowledge your mistake. You were willing to face it like a man or a woman. You did it to the best of your ability. At what point do we stop looking at the behavior and remember to see the person, because they've been there the whole time?
And I think a lot of that goes to the evidence, and kind of you were talking about, I think it was calling mom being like, I'm a year sober, and not mm-hmm. getting that. It's like, okay, year sober compared to X amount of time not living in the best way, right? Mm-hmm. So it becomes hard to be like, to have that conviction and that change. But now you're 5, 10, all this time, and you have this body of work of all you've contributed to society. Now that's what people begin to see. And I there's always going to be the people that are absolutely ignorant, stuck in their ways, and are in. But we don't. They're the outliers. They might be loud, but they're the outliers. And then you're going to have the people who probably do the same thing on the opposite end of the spectrum, who are just going to believe anything and not have to see evidence. Just be like, oh no, this person changed despite maybe not changing, right?
Yes.
But that middle is who we can speak to and to say, hey, I'm going to follow the evidence, and I'm going to treat someone based on how they're presenting and what they're doing for themselves, their family, society, finding passion, purpose. And this is kind of the first I'm hearing about this program that you are now the executive director of, and just how intuitively it's like, this is an incredible service. Because if you're able to connect someone and show them all you need is a vision, right? If you can start buying into a vision and then you get connected with the right people that can help you fulfill it, it's never a straight line process. But like you said, then the mistakes become the learning experiences. Whereas if you don't have those people, it just becomes a way of life again. And I don't know, it has me really, really excited to think that this can be a truly viable model that it's just so different. We were having this conversation with 16 maybe a month ago, where it's like, how do you make societal change? And it's like, you can't, if you have a living hell, you can't just change hell. It's been there forever. It's so established. But you can create an alternative. You can create different approaches. You don't have to absolutely tear down a system that's so ingrained, but you can create different avenues, and you can help people realize, hey, this is actually a better avenue. And then there's competition, and then there's numbers, and then hopefully you create real change. And I can see this vision kind of, because I only have this small pinhole view in, but I like what I hear. And I'm just so grateful to have this conversation tonight and have you.
Thank you.
Have you here. I know people will really get a ton out of this. Where can people find you? How can they help support your missions and your causes?
So with Evolution, you can go to Evolution Reentry Services. You can just Google that. It'll take them to the website. You'll see the history. You'll see the staff, the board of directors, the programs we offer, all the various podcasts that we do and we're a part of. We help promote, because we're one of those. We don't want to be the only game in town. We like to support everyone. So you can find me there. You can find what I do there. Plus, there's the Hall of Change and Hangtime. You can do it with Charles Grady, Michelle Litt, the two. Charlie's the founder. Michelle Litt, executive director, does phenomenal work. They do Hangtime and Her Time throughout the state. Various nights. You can get all the updates up there. You have that. Those are the two biggest places you can find me and the things that I do. But there's another thing that be on the lookout for. Me and Kevin have talked about it on a few occasions, that we're going to put this out there in the universe. We're creating a coalition of services. So because you already have the connections with some of the bigger nonprofits that do reentry. So, but there's a ton of us small nonprofits that we want to get together, create a coalition where we get together and we don't try to reinvent the wheel, but we want to communicate. So when men and women come home, they have a solid team behind them. So if I do housing, Kevin does jobs, you do resume building and things like that, financial literacy. Someone come home and they say, hey, Gordon, I need to get connected with a job. I know automatically I'm going to send them to Kevin. Go see Kevin. Tell him Gordon sent you. Oh, you need to build up your resume for that. Go see Ben. Tell him Gordon sent you. So they have a whole team, and we get together on a regular basis, monthly basis, to talk about the caseloads. So we have outcomes, because we have so many of these programs. They get these fundings and they don't have outcomes. All they do is celebrations, like, hey, we got this grant. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. prime example, and it's no shade against anybody that supported it, was like the certificate of employability that went out a couple of years ago. There was a big launch of it, capital, we're doing this, doing that. But see, the missing piece of that was there was no outcome because no one connected with employers to establish these relationships to say, hey, when my guys or my girls go through these things, go through these programs, they come to you with the certificate. This is a valid statement to say they're trained, they're ready for work. They didn't make those connections, so there was money thrown at this project, but there was no real outcomes. And that's the problem with a lot of bigger entities. They don't care about outcomes because they're already in a space where money's always coming in with grants. So if they lose the grant ring up in 3 years, they got something to take its place. But us little guys, we live and breathe by these. So we want to create something where we have outcomes so we can go back and say, hey, this is what we did with the money from last year, and here are our outcomes. We got some success stories. We got some stuff like that, and we're continue to move forward. And the only way we can do that is together. So we're going to build this like reentry coalition, if you will. We haven't named it yet, but this is the idea we're coming up. No. So where we work together to help the individual. I think everyone's deserving to come home, not just with one person behind them, but a whole team, a collection of entities, like a whole coalition behind them that has one purpose, to help them align themselves with their version of success. Not our version, but their version of success. Because it's not cookie cutter. What they view as success is up to them, and we're there to help them reach their goals. So that's something in the future down the pipeline we're trying to build, and we're going to build. That's why we're putting it in the universe right now, because it's totally needed.
It will happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, honor. Now you can't give me any more petty energy because we had.
I can come up. Oh, listen.
Well, not for this. Not for this.
I have a black belt in petty. I can find. What? I can find something to be petty over.
Well, hopefully you ain't got to find it. You know what I mean?
But it's all in love, though. I like to laugh. So.
Nah, for sure.
And when I create a podcast, I got to have you guys on it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I gave you some information about a little heads up of what it's going to be. And I could put that out there. It's going to be called Why Not Me? Mm-hmm. Why Not Me podcast? Because for so many times in our lives, everybody said, why me, why me? But the things, when they get to the other side and they become prosperous, if they honestly look, as the things they complain, why not me, has made them the person that they are to become so successful. Right. So we're going to have it, why not me? And we're going to talk about the struggles, the progress, and things like that. Some real organic conversation like this.
I love it. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to get this conversation out to the world. Thank you, Kev. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
The Falling Up Podcast.
Thank you.
Cheers.